All right. What's up, guys? This is Mad Mork Stories. I'm Patrick Mad Mork. Welcome to our second Vcast. Thanks for tuning in today. Love to have you guys here talk more about branding stuff, about marketing stuff. Today's Vcast is really about startups and branding. I get a lot of questions sometimes about startups saying, well, is it too early for us to do branding? Isn't branding kind of like a really expensive exercise? And isn't it kind of thing where you need to have raised, 10 or 20 or $30 million in venture funding to start considering doing branding, right? And quite honestly, it's kind of, it's really not true, right? I mean, there's no kind of right or wrong time to start. But oftentimes what I find is, people start on the branding stuff way too late. And that can be a big problem later when you have a much more competitive market. All of a sudden, you've been building a business for 5 years and you haven't really built your brand. And then you have a bunch of competitors that step in and execute more quickly than you. And they're more aggressive. And they might not even have a better product than you. But, they just outmarket you and they're faster at establishing a really powerful brand with consumers. So I'm not going to dive into why branding is important. If you saw my first Vcast that I did a couple weeks ago on the importance of branding and where branding comes from, I talked all about that. Quick recap on that. The short version is why do you want to have a strong brand? First, obviously, if you have a strong brand, you have better pricing power, right? On average, you're going to be able to charge 10, 15, even 20% more than nearest competitors if you have a brand that really is recognizable that people like. Second, you're going to have a lower customer churn, right? In general, when people have strong affinity to brands and are loyal, they're less likely to go try a competitor's product. They're less likely to stop using your product. Third, you typically benefit from, lower advertising costs, right? Think of any of the popular brands that be they, Nike or Google or somebody else, when they introduce a new product, because they have, the ability to piggyback on the master brand, they save on advertising costs, right? People recall the brand more easily, more quickly, and so they have to spend less. And fourth, really, strong brands inspire loyalty, not just among customers, but also among employees. So when you have a really strong brand, you find it easier to hire better people for your company. And, you also find it easier to retain the existing employees that you have, right? A lot of the research shows that clearly millennials in particular want to work in companies that have like real strong purpose, real strong social value, and real strong brands. So, when you think of your startup, whether you're, three guys working in a garage, or, you've just raised your Series A from Excel, or you're doing Series B or Series C, it's never early enough, to start this process. I always think, you should start it as early as possible. Couple of reasons why you should do that. The first really is kind of like a strong brand is going to give you a really singular purpose and direction, right? When you're developing your brand Bible, and if you're not familiar with the term brand Bible, check out my blog, madmork.com/blog. I have a post that talks just about brand Bibles. When you develop your brand Bible, which is this all-encompassing document that has everything about your brand, right? Your brand values, your brand personality, your attributes, your brand pyramid, your core brand essence, etc. It gives your company and your management team a very clear definition of what your vision, your mission, your brand story, your target audience, and your reason for being is, right? So once you've established all of those things, vision, mission, brand story, messaging, target audience, and your reason for being, and you've aligned everybody around you on what those terms are, then it becomes a lot easier to make decisions on where you're going to go, right? So, for example, if one of your core brand attributes is to be transparent and honest, when your customer support people are talking to people and they have an issue with your product, they're going to be transparent and honest and tell them exactly why the product might not be behaving up to spec, because that's one of your core brand values, right? That was established from the beginning in your brand Bible. It's something that everybody in your company knows. Hey, we're supposed to be honest and transparent. That's a core value. And so they will behave that way. And likewise, it affects all sorts of other decisions that you make, right? When you're doing product design or introducing new features, depending on what kind of brand values you've established and what is brand and what is not on brand, it will make decisions easier in terms of what kind of things that you do on the product, right? Which leads us to the second point is really, once you have a singular direction and a purpose that everybody's agreed to, making decisions just becomes a lot easier, right? You don't get into a lot of the subjective nuances on certain things, whether it's strategy or whether it's what kind of campaigns you're going to run, what kind of PR you're going to do, what kind of features you're going to add. A whole bunch of things just become a lot easier, when people are in sync and when people have a very good idea of what the brand is and what the brand is not. It just speeds the decision-making process, right? Third, hiring becomes easier, right? And like I said earlier, the evidence clearly is there that, particularly millennials want to work in companies that have strong brands. They want to work in companies that have a strong sense of purpose, that have, strong kind of social impact, and that have strong brands, right? This is important to them. It's important to a lot of different employees, but it's even more important to millennials these days. So, when you're able to tell them a compelling story and get them excited about that, it checks that box off for them. They're like, here's a company that has a purpose. Here's a company that clearly is doing something good that I can get behind, that I can get excited about. And so, they're much more likely to be excited about, the job offer that you have for them, right? And you want to get great people, right? So at the end of the day, if you want to get great people, telling them a great story, which is part of what your brand essence is, really matters, right? Fourth, building a brand takes time, right? And so the longer it takes for you to make that decision on, hey, we're going to start investing in brand, we're going to start to do things to actively build our brand, the longer it's going to take, right? There aren't that many shortcuts. I mean, yes, in the age of social media, and mobile, if you raise a whole bunch of money, you can somewhat accelerate things by just spending a lot. But even then, having a brand that really resonates, that people implicitly get what your brand message is and what you stand for and what you're trying to do, there's a certain amount of time that takes place before people really get it, right? For example, on average, the law of advertising is it takes 8 different advertisements, right? So 8 times that you watch something on TV or on YouTube before you actually understand the message, right? For a new product. On average, 8 times the frequency is how long it takes you to really understand something. So, you can accelerate these things so much by dialing up the spend or not, but there's no huge shortcuts, and it takes time. So the sooner you start doing it, the better. The fifth thing, of course, is, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't do it, your competitors are going to do it, right? And you may have an amazing product, you may have great technology, that all risks going away if all of a sudden somebody comes into the market with, a product that's maybe comparable to yours, might not even be as good, but they come in and they just decide to spend a fair amount of money, and they're investing heavily in brand, and they have a really good story, and it's very, very clear, and consumers just get it. You're at risk of being left behind, right? And I have a little story on that. A couple of years ago, I was working as an entrepreneur in residence in a venture firm, and one of the companies I was helping, was in the messaging space. And, a bunch of you have probably heard of Slack, right? A bunch of you probably use Slack, use it every day, etc. I don't know if you've heard of Hall, right? Hall.com, they were an enterprise messaging solution as well. They had a pretty good product. And I remember speaking with the CEO and trying to convince them to get more aggressive about marketing, to get more aggressive about their brand, to really go out and drive the product forward. And, they had a challenge, which is, they had some features and they had some functionality that they wanted to improve, and the product was never quite there for them. And when they were always kind of like, let's tweak this, let's continue to work on this. We don't want to invest in marketing or in branding yet because we're not quite sure the product is perfectly there. And the product was pretty good, but they wanted to perfect it. Well, the long story short is, Slack, which wasn't even in the market, right? They were a gaming company. Slack all of a sudden pivots and builds this messaging solution and starts to really execute on the marketing and the sales and starts to really drive their branding. That was all she wrote, right? At the end of the day, Slack became one of the dominant forces in enterprise messaging, and they are, one of the leaders today, which everybody uses. And Hall.com was acquired by Altasian, and I don't know what the terms of the acquisition were. It was okay, but there's nothing kind of to write home to your mom about. And they are kind of part of ancient history, right? So the point is, if you don't do it, somebody else possibly will, and they will beat you to market, right? And that's the issue. Is you can perfectly win and be very successful being a first mover, but you can also be very successful being what I call a fast follower, right? Somebody who comes in after the market and then really invests aggressively, has a good product, has a strong brand and a strong story, and just kind of turbochargers and cruises to get market share, right? That's the risk if you don't invest, is, somebody potentially will, and they'll beat you to the punch. So, okay, as a startup, what can you do, right? There's limitations on what you can do, particularly if you're small and you don't have a lot of resource. I get that, right? You're not going to go out and do, NFL spots. You're not going to go out and sponsor, Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. But there are a number of things that you can do from the get-go, even when you're a small company. So you can start to layer and build that foundation for what you want your brand to be. So the first thing, as I mentioned in another post, again, madmork.com/blog, you should develop your brand Bible, right? And I'm not going to go into the details of what the brand Bible is. It's in that post. There's a lot of information that explains it. But that's where it starts, is you and your founders and you and your marketing team sitting down and fleshing out all the things in the brand Bible, your brand attributes, your vision, your mission, et cetera, all the good stuff that goes in there. So start with the brand Bible. Second, you want to make sure that you develop a pretty strong and compelling brand logo and visual identity, right? I mean, if your logo looks like crap and your colors are all off and things are, your imagery is blurry and things are not consistent on your website or your mobile, that's bad for your brand, right? And so you want to make sure that you have a strong logo that you apply consistently everywhere. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. The reality is if you go to sites like 99designs.com or visual.ly, there's a lot of different places that offer relatively inexpensive, graphic design work, so you can build something compelling. If you, go to madmork.com, you look at my logo for Mad Mork Stories. I did that on 99designs.com, right? So kudos, lead gen for the guys at 99 Designs. Great job. It worked very well. I did a contest and it cost me like $1,500 or something. So do yourself a favor, invest in that, do it well. Third, once you have that great logo and you have your brand book and stuff and your brand colors, invest it consistently. Be consistent about it. Make sure that, your business cards, your website, your mobile site, your blog, your social media channels, everything has that logo and it's applied really consistently. When you're doing your email campaigns, make sure that you have a nice little template that's on brand, right? The more consistent things are across the different properties on which you market your product, the more consumers are going to get that, and the more they're going to kind of recall and remember your brand. So be consistent, right? It's all about consistency. Fourth, you want to make sure that you establish your vision, mission, and brand values early, right? And that you are constantly repeating those things all the time to your employees. So, when I was at Course Hero, the CEO there, Andrew Grau, did a pretty good job of that. Every time we had an all-hands meeting, he would talk about our vision, our mission, what we're trying to do, why. And people got that, and it was kind of so repetitive that at the end of the day, you wonder, well, like, why are we talking about this every single all hands? Well, because learning is repetition, right? We're at the end of the day, from cradle to grave, we're all still children. We're all always learning every day, and the fact is that you have to repeat things so that people remember. And also, you're going to have new employees all the time, so you want those new employees to be hearing that message as well, right? So repeat your brand values, vision, mission, statement often. And fifth, of course, you want to develop a really compelling story, right? So, what is your reason for being, right? And Simon Sinek on YouTube has a great video about this, which is all about, the why, right? So, and I talked about this in one of my other posts as well. People don't buy, what you do, they buy why you do it, right? As Simon says. And I think that's great. I think that's like so on target. People really care about why are you doing what you're doing? Don't really talk to me about the product features. Talk to me about why this solves a pain point for me. Talk to me about why it matters, and talk to me about why you guys are the companies that I should be working with. So, those are some of the easy things that you can do. 5 things: your brand Bible, developing a strong logo and visual identity, applying this logo relentlessly across everything you do, establishing your vision and mission and brand values and repeating them often, and then lastly, developing a compelling story. So, what I'll finish off by saying is, branding is, it's not a sprint, guys. It's a marathon. It takes time to do. There's no real shortcut. You can have less or more money to do it. You can do better or worse branding. That's true. But the earlier you start, the better off you'll be. And when you have a strong brand, everybody from your employees to your customers, to your investors, to your partners will see that. And it will be really worth the investment. So that's me. That's Mad Mork signing off. Hope this was totally useful to you guys. Subscribe to my channel. Leave me comments as well. Let me know what you thought. Particularly keen to know, was this relevant? Was it useful? Are there other things you'd like me to talk about? I'm going to be posting, on average 1 or 2 videos a week on my channel. So, all feedback is good feedback, even if it's not good. If it's not good, that's cool. That's what we learn from. That certainly helps me learn and grow. And happy branding. Have a good one. Thanks again for your time. And that's me signing off. Later.